John Daigle, Warren Sharp. We're going to look at the NFC Wild Card weekend playoff picture. We'll go through all three games. We'll start with a game that we've seen a couple times already this year. A couple divisional opponents, the Rams versus the Seahawks. There's some quarterback questions, obviously, with the Rams. We'll get into that. But, Warren, I want to start with Seattle and offensively for them, because what an interesting year it has been for Russell Wilson in that offense. Beginning of the year, big play offense, boom, couldn't slow him down. You kind of wonder where that went here in the second half of the year.
Well, there's a couple of factors. One is that they caused it themselves with some of their play calling. The other is the way that defenses started adjusting to take away DK Metcalf playing two high safeties a little bit more often. But starting with number one, I mean, for the first 10 weeks, this team was the most pass-heavy offense in the NFL on early downs in the first half, and they completely flipped the switch. They went to a more run-based approach after two straight losses, and this team obviously has had success since then, and their defense has improved. But the frustration for me is, if you're Pete Carroll, you don't have to have this be an either or. Like, if our defense is good, then we don't need as much out of Russ. Or if our defense is bad, let's just unlock Russ. Why don't we unlock this offense all the time and also have a good defense? Both of those things can be good and utilized in this game. But I do have a feeling that they're going to come out here. Now, let's not go too far. It's not like this team was going the one most run-heavy team. They were still in the top half of the league in pass rate, but they just shifted dramatically from the number one team down. And I think it's going to be interesting to see if they have any success whatsoever unlocking DK Metcalf over the top, because the Rams do play a lot of two high safety looks, and that's really given Russ a lot of trouble. He's dynamic against single high safety, significantly worse with a touchdown rate that's approximately 50% of what it was in two high safety, in one high safety look. So I think it's going to be a challenge from the play calling perspective, and I'm curious to see how Brian Schottenheimer comes out and starts this game. But it would not shock me at all if they start out a little bit more conservatively than I would like.
Yeah, what do you think, Daigle? Because it really is one of the most interesting matchups this whole weekend. Russell Wilson versus what statistically is the best defense in the NFL.
It's interesting because Tyler Lockett, at least he showed something in week 17 and finally getting up the schneid and going over 70 yards for the first time in 8 games. Went through a poor stretch there, as he did last year over the second half of the season. And it could come down to him because DK Metcalf, we've seen him in 2 matchups now against Jalen Ramsey, and Ramsey allowed only 1 catch all year to DK Metcalf, the almighty Metcalf, in both the games played. So if they're going to move the ball, it's likely going to come that way. And like Warren said, I worry that they will not allow Russ to cook. I do think that is their best option to win here. But if not, we know that Carlos Hyde got healthy, and they're going to turn around in this game with all 3 of their top backs, and Chris Carson and Rashad Penny as well, and perhaps just try to pound the ball and avoid passing against the Rams. So it is an interesting matchup, although I do think, unless they allow Russ to cook, their offense will struggle against what was the number 1 defense over the second half of the season.
So, Daigle, what about the other side of the ball here? And we don't totally know who's going to be at quarterback for Sean McVay. He has indicated that he won't let us know until perhaps game day with Goff and Walford. Maybe it won't matter a whole bunch because the Seattle defense is playing so much better than it did earlier in the year.
Seattle's defense is playing better, and while that is true, the fact that they haven't faced anyone since week 11 can also be true. And that's why I have confidence in the Rams at least moving the ball. I don't know if they'll win, but I think they will have some offensive success here, because since week 11, the Seahawks have faced Carson Wentz, Colt McCoy, Sam Darnold, Dwayne Haskins, Jared Goff, who got injured in that game as well, and CJ Beathard, allowing 5.5 yards per attempt in that span. Again, practically no one in terms of who they will face in the playoffs. So if Jared Goff is able to turn around in this game, and remember, he's played Seattle twice since week 8. He got over 300 yards in their first matchup against them. So I think, again, they can have success. And it's also encouraging that Cam Akers returned from a high ankle sprain, only missed 1 game miraculously, and handled 25 backfield touches in his return, including over 50 yards receiving. So again, I think they can move the ball in this game.
Warren, most likely outcome in your eyes?
I think this game starts off a little bit slower with Sean McVay trying to measure. I do think Jared Goff gets the start here, but I think his downfield accuracy may have some issues early on in this game with the injury. I think they start off with a little bit more of a conservative approach, and I would expect Seattle to as well. I would like Seattle to play a little bit more aggressively, but I'm not so sure. John's point is extremely valid in the fact that I don't think Seattle's defense has played very many good opposing offenses, but I kind of think this game comes out the gate a little bit slowly. So I expect a lower scoring first half, maybe makes for a little bit of an under in the first half. We'll see once Goff gets announced up if the total moves up so that we could get perhaps a 21.5 in the first half, which is one of the things I'm eyeing. And but I don't really know this outcome. I do think it's going to be a tight game, and I don't really see a lot of value in taking one team or the other here. I'm leaning a little bit more towards the under.
And we saw last week as well in a must-win game, Seattle play with their food until their final 3 possessions. And then Russ comes out, throws 2 big touchdowns to Tyler Lockett inside the 10, and then hands off to Alex Collins for the go-ahead score. So maybe that is the case. It's a slow game for 3 quarters, and then they allow Russ to throw, and he just finishes this one up and heads to the divisional round single-handedly.
Almost like Seattle was toying with us. They toy with them in the beginning of the game, and then end of the game, Russ cooks. We can kind of say the same thing about Tom Brady here in this other matchup between the Buccaneers and the Washington football team. It was like Brady was toying with us in the beginning of the year. He is on fire heading into the playoffs. The question, Daigle, is the only chance maybe Washington has in this game is if that front 4 can get to him. The question is, can they do it?
5 first-rounders in their front 7. A monstrous one that has created pressure at the league's 6th highest rate. And we know that's where Brady has struggled. 57 of 130 for 5 yards per attempt, 33rd in completion rate when under pressure. So I think it comes down to Washington's front 7 essentially being their offense and trying to get the Bucs off the field and allowing Alex Smith to move the ball. Now, we already know Ron Rivera said that Taylor Heineke will possibly come in for packages and split reps in a committee with Alex Smith. And I think that's fine. As great as a story Alex Smith was, he still only threw 2 touchdowns in 1 of his past 7 starts, and that was week 17 last week against that banged up Phillies defense that couldn't stop anyone over the last month because they just had too many injuries in their secondary. Heineke has shown the ability, even when he started under Rivera and Carolina, to move the ball with his legs as well. So we know the Bucs blitz at the league's 6th highest rate, and we know that they've allowed 6 receptions per game to opposing running backs. So the Bucs are going to send everyone at Alex Smith, who possibly can't move, or Tyler Heineke, who's staring down headlights like a deer. They're going to dump off to their running backs. So I think will be more of a dink and dunk game plan, getting the ball out of his quarterback's hands for O.C. Scott Turner as quickly as possible, just to avoid the Bucs eating them alive. Like they showed us so many times this year. They single-handedly stopped Aaron Rodgers. They stuffed Kirk Cousins, forcing him to run for a career high in yards because he just couldn't see downfield with everyone in his face. And I think it's going to be a similar game plan. Just get rid of the ball as fast as possible.
Interesting. Dink and dunk for Washington. Tampa Bay with Tom Brady has not been shy of throwing the ball downfield. Of course, that's what Bruce Arians likes to do. Did it last year with Jameis Winston. I don't know if he'll have the time to do it, Warren, in this game, but what do you think about putting that ball in Tom Brady's hand and just basically letting him try to beat this defense himself?
That's why they brought Tom Brady here. I mean, let's not make this any nicer than it needs to be. They brought Tom Brady here to have the ball in his hand in the playoffs and win games for Tampa Bay. They didn't bring in here for Byron Leftwich, call run plays to Leonard Fournette on first downs in the first half of games. The first 14 games of the season, they were running the ball on 52% of these first downs in the first half. They averaged just 2.7 yards per carry, which was the worst in the NFL. The last 3 weeks, they sort of turned a corner. They switched that up completely, went to a major heavy pass rate, let Tom Brady throw the ball more on first downs. That's exactly what they need to do here against Washington, particularly early in this game, because Washington's defense makes the best halftime adjustments. They have the best defense in the second half. I know they played an easy schedule, but they've allowed since week 6 only 44 points to be scored in the second half of games. The next closest team is up at 77, and there's a bunch bunched around 80, 82, 83. They're down at 44. They're allowing 4 points in the second half per game. The Bucs have to get started early here. They have to let Tom Brady throw the football on first downs. If they do that and establish a lead, that also has the benefit of forcing Alex Smith into a lot of second half dropbacks on his injured and limited calf muscle and his bum other leg that obviously it's a miracle that he's even out there on the field. and then they can get a little bit more pressure in these predictable pass situations. So it's the perfect recipe. It's just a matter of whether or not Byron Leftwich and Bruce Arians let Tom Brady throw the ball on first down, which is the best time to throw it against this Washington defense because their pressure rate is significantly below the league average on first down, but significantly above the league average on second and third down. Got to let Brady throw the ball on first downs in the first half.
Warren, it's a dumb narrative, I know, but do you put any stock into what I dubbed the Brady bedtime narrative? We know his training regimen was going to bed at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, and the Bucs are 1-3 in prime time, and he struggled mightily in those 4 games against the Bears, Giants, the Saints, and the Rams, averaging under 7 yards per attempt in all 4 contests. So I don't know if it's prime time. I don't know if we're actually weighing that. But again, this is another Saturday night game for them.
To me, it's more than just a storyline because he has to make some adjustments. I think that earlier in his career wasn't as big of a deal, but he's gotten a lot more health conscious over the last several years and gotten a little bit more into like health and going to sleep early. I hope that over the last week, seeing the time of this game, he's made some adjustments to his sleep habits. His sleep habits do factor in. Your circadian rhythm does factor in. He better have stayed up late. I did tweet out, I said, Tom Brady liked this tweet. If you're still awake, it was like 8:40 p.m. one night. He didn't like it, so I'm not confident.
Well, there it is. Only one possible explanation. He was, in fact, asleep. Well, maybe he can take a nap. Maybe that's what he'll have to do. In our last game, hey, don't nap on the Chicago Bears offense here, taking on the New Orleans Saints. The Bears offense has been a lot better here the last few weeks. We'll have to look deeper into that. But Warren, what do you make of their matchup here against a really good Saints defense to start this talk on this game?
Yeah, this is probably the least favorite of the games for me this entire Super Wild Card weekend. But the impressive thing about the Chicago Bears is they decided mid-year to get away from Matt Nagy's play calling to bring on Bill Lazor. And I think Bill Lazor, his first game or two, was a little bit rough. Got Mitch Trubisky in there, started doing more things that Mitch likes, and this team has had some success. But as Daigle alluded to in a different game, strength of schedule really does matter here. And Mitch Trubisky was getting it done against the number one easiest schedule of opposing defenses the final 4 weeks of the season before he played the Green Bay Packers. And they were moving the ball a little bit on Green Bay to start that game, but the Saints defense is entirely a different animal. The Saints play the highest rate of man coverage of any defense in the NFL on the season, and Mitch Trubisky just struggles against man coverage. And so I'm concerned a little bit that he's not going to have the support of the ground game here, which he's been able to rely on against some of these bad defenses. The ball is going to fall into his hands a little bit more. He's going to be dealing with a pass rush and a lot of man coverage from the Saints. And on the road, I mean, thankfully, they're not going to have the normal level of fans that they have in the Superdome for a playoff game. But I still think it's a really uphill battle for Mitch Trubisky against this heavy man defense.
Yeah, Daigle, other side of the ball, the Saints offense. Michael Thomas hasn't been the same this year. Of course, he was hurt a little bit. Drew Brees, you always are concerned about him at the end of the year and perhaps in the playoffs, although I think he's looked a little bit better at the end of the year this year. Offensively, for the Saints, can they rely on the Kamaras and the Michael Thomas and the Drew Brees?
Well, to your point, Brees has looked better at the end of the year. Averaged 7.5 yards per attempt until he got injured. He returned from injury in 3 games and somehow, like he did last year, closed the year strong, 300 yards and or 3 touchdowns in those 3 contests. And this is a completely different game for the Saints offense than when they played the Bears earlier this year. Again, no Michael Thomas in that game. Thomas played in only 7 games all year, made only 2 full appearances with Brees, and then failed to play against the Bears. So they haven't seen Michael Thomas. Even the Saints haven't seen Michael Thomas for much this year. Meanwhile, Alvin Kamara had 163 yards on 21 touches in that game. So the Saints really coming into this one full strength. And more importantly, coming into the postseason full strength with a defense that, although the schedule, yes, like Warren said, still ranked number 2 over the second half of the season, just behind the Rams. So the only thing that I have a hang-up in thinking the Saints will struggle here is practically just 2019 PTSD of Dalvin Cook showing up off injury and running all over them surprisingly, despite the fact the Saints were over touchdown favorites at home. I do think the Saints, though, show up and take care of business, especially against the Bears defense that has quietly struggled over the second half of the season. They didn't have slot cornerback Buster Screen, short starting rookie cornerback Jalen Johnson, and of course safety Dion Bush as well. And so if those guys aren't able to turn around here for a Saints offense that is now full strength, I think New Orleans just takes care of business.
All right. I think that's all we need to talk about this game. Warren hates it already. Let's just finish it up right there. All right. That's the NFC. The NFC playoff preview, all 3 games, guys. Appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.